Boxing game fans, this man needs no introduction, but I'll do it very briefly. The legend Jim Trunzo, Title Bout, and the many iterations thereof. Thank you, sir, so much for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, believe me, I'm humbled. It's a pleasure to be here. And legend, I don't know, but we've been at it for quite some time. So hopefully something good comes out of it.
42 years, I believe you said.
Yeah. 2 years prior to that, we had put out something on our own. When I say we, my brother and I, called Truco Boxing. It was in a little spiral bound self-print deal. Jim Barnes from Status Pro gave us a boost right before Christmas, said he would sell for us. The next year when we wanted to expand, because we'd only done like 50 heavyweights for him, his business was just booming and he didn't have room for us. We tried it on our own, put a couple thou in, printing up some games, and lost almost all of it. So we thought maybe this is it. But fortuitously, part of the reason Barnes didn't do it, he was in negotiations with Avalon Hill. Avalon Hill had signed on into an agreement with Sports Illustrated. And they had agreed to provide Sports Illustrated with a game in every one of the major sports. And 42 years ago, hard to believe that, but boxing was considered a major sport at one point. And so he gave them his hockey, his football, and so forth. And they said, well, do you know anybody with a boxing game? He said, I got these two guys up in PA. He said, I think that they might be interested. And from there on, we went down, we met with them in Baltimore with Avalon Hill, and that got us started.
Wow, awesome. Let's back up a bit if we could.
Sure.
Just your childhood and your how you became interested in boxing and how you and your brother kind of enjoyed the sport.
Yeah, my dad was a champion in the service. He boxed in the service. When he came out, he was going to continue, but the bottom line was it didn't pay. He had just gotten married. The steel mill opened up and and he had a position, so he went that way. But he never got over. He was a big boxing fan. One of his brother-in-laws had one of the first color TVs. So it became a big deal to go out on a Wednesday night or a Friday night for the fights. And it was a rite of passage when you got invited to come, and I still vividly remember when he says, come on, you can come with me to Uncle Frank's and we're going to watch the fights. He said, Sugar Ray Robinson's fighting. Unfortunately, it wasn't the Sugar Ray Robinson that we all think of, the greatest of all time. It was Sugar Ray against, when he was about 97 against the Journeyman, and he actually lost that night. And there was also a young Italian guy on who was a middleweight. His name was Joe DiNucci. And we were all Italians. We had, a picture of the Pope on one wall and Marciano on the other. And we thought, oh, this DiNucci kid, man, he's going places. Well, he did politically. He became, a local politician, a mayor or something. Professionally as a boxer, not so much, but that was basically the beginning. My brother enjoyed the sport, but it wasn't really his thing. What it was his thing was math. He was a tremendous at math. So I'd do the research, say, here's what I'd like to do. What do you think? And he'd send back and say, here's the way we got to build the chart and the table, and here's what's what. And we massaged it from there, and it seemed to work.
Were you playing many board games at the time and thinking, wow, I really want to get into that area? Or was it just, we love boxing so much, we have to be able to do this when the TV's not on and we can just play or box who we want to box?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes to both ends. Basically what happened, we were like you, we started out with like an old APBA football game. I remember Y.A. Tittle was a quarterback for the Giants. It was like, I can't believe it. Look, they make games like this. And then we discovered Stratomatic, and of course, we cheated all the time. Bob Ville was pitching a one hitter. We said, no, I think that roll was bad. Let's roll it over. Yeah, he's got the no hitter. But basically, yeah, through the years, we attempted to play most of the sports games that were simulated, with the exception of APBA basketball, because we just didn't have 3 years to finish a game. I mean, I know we got through a half of the Lakers against the Celtics, and that was pretty much it. We punted, but at the time, the only game, the boxing game we could find was the Game Co. had a little boxing game out, and there was a small sports newspaper type thing that would occasionally put in a couple extra boxers, and then we found data boxing, which was very popular for a while, and even today, I know there are a lot of people that still think data boxing was a tremendous simulation. But the more we played and we enjoyed, the more we felt, we could expand on this. And the key became Jim Barnes. The problem that we had initially encountered, and I'm guessing that it may have been the same for other people who tried boxing, was we couldn't generate the feel with dice. It was just too slow. When you have to, roll for a punch, did it land, where to go, pick up the dice. All right, let's roll again. It didn't seem like you were throwing punches. It just didn't. But when Jim Barnes came out with his Status Pro line, now I don't know that he was the godfather of this or whether he got it somewhere else, but he used, instead of using dice, he used fast action cards, flip cards. And it was like, whoa, here you go. Look how fast that can go. And one reading on each card. And basically that's what let the game take off, was the fast action cards.
And it's interesting because fast action cards these days are so common, but then it's kind of a precedent, right?
Exactly. The first time we had encountered it was with Barnes's Status Pro games. And we talked to him and he says, hey, I don't have a copyright on this. Go ahead, try it out. And that made all the difference, simply, and it came down simply to the speed of reading a result, that gave you that feel that, like, okay, things are happening and in between. So that was the turning point.
How long did it take you to create and test the game and kind of finalize what you wanted?
I would say literally years, back and forth. At the time that right before Avalon Hill, I had started college. My brother was still in high school. So when I'd come home, we'd do it, or this was prior to massive internet connections and so on and so forth. So it was all, by phone, and then I'd come home on a weekend, and he would still be home, and we'd go after. So it took some time because we just weren't coming up with the kind of results we wanted. Then it would be, let's go back to the drawing board. And basically what we did was take two heavyweights that we really, really knew a ton about, being Ali and Marciano. And we had an expected outcome, and we refined the game until we were getting pretty much the results we wanted. From there, then we went, okay, now instead of two grays, let's see what happens if we put Marciano against the stiff. Can he take him out in a couple rounds? If we put Ali against another slick boxer, and so we went back and forth, attempting to. We knew that if we could get the right combination, get it correctly with the right combinations, then that formula would carry over regardless of who. If it was Ali and Chevalo, well, then it could also be Archie Moore and Zora Force. And whatever two we wanted to put together, we basically had X number of boilerplates, and then could tweak from there.
What were the mechanics that you tried to get? You looked at a boxing match and you tell yourself, how do we translate that? What are the key aspects? I mean, you got anything from punching power, range, motion, endurance?
Well, there were something we had. I think the original cards had somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 dozen to between 2 and 3 dozen categories. But we realized right off the bat there were some things that we couldn't do simply because the statistics weren't there, like reach. Makes a great idea, but there were only X number of fighters who had documented reach. And if you couldn't do it for everybody, you didn't want to do it for just some. So we knew we had 4 major areas of action, 4 things that happen. You move in the ring, you punch in the ring, you clinch in the ring, or you throw a punch and you either punch and land or punch and miss. So we took the 4 basic actions and then went from there. And within those 4 major categories, then we built up subdivisions. Okay, if you land, what kind of punch? If you land, how hard a punch? Then, okay, now we landed the punch. It was a hard punch. Was it hard enough to knock him down? Well, I guess that depends on this guy's chin. So now we go this way. And, it evolved almost step by step. All right, that makes sense. That works. Now what? Well, does he get up? So it's like, okay, recovery. And don't these guys ever get tired? Oh, yeah, we better put endurance in, What happens when their endurance runs out? Well, I guess this happens, So, and trying to find a rule of thumb was difficult too, because there was so much variety. Some guys, they got exhausted. They fought harder just because they knew they were, they were going to put it all into what was left. Other guys were boxed a little more intelligently and said, okay, I'm tiring. I'm going to take this round off because I think I've got a big lead. So from the nuances that we'd see in actual fights, we started to expand the categories, cuts, fouls, and so forth, to include as much as we could, we felt, without bogging the game down with just too many things to check. Wait a minute, he landed a punch, now what? Oh, we got to do this. Yeah, but then did he get cut? Oh, now we got to check. No, so we made sure that, for example, if there was a possibility of a cut, it was on X number of the cards you flipped. And if it didn't say cut when you landed a punch, you didn't check for a cut. And we came about that way. And we got very lucky because I was writing articles at that point for Ring Magazine. And, excuse me, I had started out with Nate Fleischman and worked my way up. And my editor, Randy Gordon, and my prime editor, though, was Steve Farhood. And he happened to be one of these guys that was an advanced thinker, and he liked the concept of what if fights. So I did a series of, okay, well, you have John Conte, and he was a champion, and you had Victor Galindez, and these 2 guys, they were contemporaries. They were both champions, yet they never met. So I'll tell you what, for the next article in Ring, we're going to do what if Galindez had met Conte. And from there, it branched out a little to, okay, here's an upcoming fight. What do you think is going to happen? Well, okay, we'll do this. And once the computer came into the picture, where I could fight 100 fights in 10 seconds and just accumulate the results, that really made a difference as far as the articles went. And it also let us test some of the guys that we weren't really sure of, or how come this is happening too much? And we could tweak a specific number, one category at a time. Okay, did that make a difference? He should win 70% of the time, and he's winning 50%. That doesn't make sense. Well, why? Well, let's try this. And whether it be, okay, we're going to adjust his defense a little, make it a little better, make it a little worse, whatever. We tweak it until we could get that 70% result. We never wanted 100%. And the reason I think for any gamer is obvious. If it's 100%, it's not a game. It's just you sit there and, the outcome. That's no fun. You want to have at least, you don't want Henry Tillman knocking out Ali. But Ken Norton beating Ali, that's okay, And if he does it twice out of 10 times, we're right on. So we never shot for 100% for that very reason. Not that I know that we could have gotten it anyhow without making it just, okay, well, nobody can. And Ali, in the same line, Ali was so good that nobody could beat him. Not even Joe Louis, who was probably the next highest rated. And, we would get comments from people like, yeah, Ali, he's great, but is he too good? And it'd be like, well, and he says, but he doesn't beat any of them. He doesn't, or Dempsey can't beat him. Tunney can't beat him. Foreman can't beat him. Frazier surely can't beat. And we realized, okay, he's just, part of it's a bias on our part. We grew up with him. He was the legend, and obviously had characteristics. And what really changed it was are you aware Russell Peltz was a big time promoter in Philadelphia. He ran the Blue Horizon in Philly. And I had a discussion. I was doing an article for Ring Magazine on the 10 best defensive fighters in boxing, because power's always acknowledged, lousy chin or great chin acknowledged. But defense is something that it's there, but you don't see it nearly as much unless it's somebody brilliant like a Willie Pep or Floyd Mayweather or somebody. It's not in your face the way a punch is. So we were doing an article on, okay, well, Luis Rodriguez, he's got to be in there. How about Willie Pep? How about? And I called Russell Peltz to get his opinion. And I said, well, what about Ali? He's got to be one of the top 10s. He says he's one of the lousiest defensive fighters you'll ever see. I said, well, I got him, top. He said, now here's the thing. He said, he doesn't do anything right. He said, from a fundamentalist standpoint, from a purist standpoint, forget it. He does everything wrong. He pulls straight back instead of to the side. He keeps his hands down too low. He does this. He doesn't block with his shoulder. He does, but he has reflexes like a cat, or and a big cat to boot. And he said, he can. He does things that other boxers, if they try to do it, they're just not going to get away with it. Yeah, he can slip a punch with his head quick, or he can take a step back and then fly forward and hit you with a counter. But George Foreman can't do that. Joe Frazier can't do that. He's one of a kind. But if you ask me purely, is he a great defensive fighter? He's not even a good one. He said what he is. And that was duplicated, I think, a lot with Roy Jones Jr. Same thing. I mean, if you watch, Roy Jones' fight, he's not orthodox in any way, but he's brilliant with his move. He can slip with, he can do a shoulder feint and make a guy. He does a lot of things just because he's so brilliant athletically, or was, until he kept fighting when he was 57. But, speaking of that, how about Evander Holyfield getting his clock cleaned? Oh my God! Why they ever let this guy in? He didn't make it through 2 minutes of the first round. That's scary.
Did you get a lot of user feedback as you designed the game?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Most of it was constructive. Some of it was this sucked. Your game is terrible. I fought this guy and he lost, but he beat him in real life. And our biggest deal was trying to explain to people, look, first of all, it's a game, okay? It's not a science. Second, you're basing an assumption on a single fight. I said, this isn't baseball where a guy gets 50 at-bats against the same pitcher, but only hits 100 against him. So okay. And over 3 years, he faces him 150 times, and he still can't hit him. Now you got something there. This is probably one fight at best 3, a trilogy maybe. So if you fight I said, I'll tell you what, fight those same 2 guys 10 times, let me know what happens. And if so-and-so doesn't win this many out of 10, you're right. We've got a problem. We don't have 9 admitting it. We'll make some changes. And that was usually pretty good, but for the most part, because it was the only game in town, most people were like, hey, could you do this? Or could you add this aspect? Or can you tell us why you did that? That was a big one. We don't understand why you built that. Why is that in the game? What's it for? What's it? And when you'd explain it, you get, I see. Okay, I can go with that. Because it's a niche sport, and even in its best, well, except in the golden age, but for the most part, over the last 30 years or so, that's what it is. It's a niche sport. If you happen to like it, you watch it, but it's not pro basketball, pro football, baseball. But the people who do like it are fanatical about it. I mean, absolutely fanatical. With the Title Bout II that I started doing on my own, I put out 150 heavyweights, and it would be like, you're going to put out more. It's like, you can't fight 150 guys. Oh, yeah, but I want some of these guys. I need some guys that he can knock out. Can you make? Okay, and we came up with a set of gatekeepers and trial horses that you could build your record against before you put them in against. And then we get my great-grandpa, honest to God, this is true. My great-grandfather, he was a boxer in 1932, my mom said, and he had like a 12-0 record. Do you think you could make a card for him? And it was like, probably not, but if you can give me every statistic, I can try. But it's kind of takes a lot of time. But we'd get requests like that. So the people who enjoyed the game and consistently bought it year after year, very much were hardcore boxing fans, and they knew their stuff. So you couldn't pull something on them.
How many years, seasons of boxers have you calculated, and about how long does it take you to do that?
Well, we did when we stopped with Avalon Hill, we had 4,300 some fighters rated in a database, and not counting testing the results, but just constructing the card, about 2 hours a fighter. That was with a pencil and a pen. That time got cut drastically once the internet, we had access to like BoxRec and feedback from CompuSports and Ring Magazine opening up their a lot of their research to us to make this and give them a credit in the process as hey, this came from Ring, And once that came up and we could start using spreadsheets instead of calculators, and or long division, things became much, much simpler, and we could do it much faster. I'd say now I probably within, and I'm old, so I have to take my time, but I can do 100 fighters in a month and a half at most, to the point where I feel, okay, that's good enough. I can send it to the printers. They can print the cards and I don't have to worry too much about it, unless I've made a major mistake. So, but at the time it was very time consuming, and it's still time consuming, but it's only because I'm a bit of a perfectionist in the sense that I need to feel good about it. What I do now is if it's a fighter, and I don't do current fighters for two reasons. First, I'm not really up on all the current fighters. Two, it's just too hard to judge somebody on 10 or 15 fights. Nowadays in boxing, you're 15-0 and 13 knockouts, and you're the number 2 contender, or the number 1 contender. And all you've done is fight 47-year-old people with an 0-13 record, but your record if on paper, you look like a killer. And then they get in against their first competent fighter, their first maybe top 15 fighter, lower end of the top 15, lower end of the top 10, and they get their clock cleaned, So if I were basing a card on this guy that was 13 or 15-0 with 13 knockouts, it's going to look like modern day George Foreman based on just the numbers. So I only do people who fighters who have retired for the most part. Occasionally, as a gimme to my customers, they'll say, "Come on, do Canelo Alvarez and Triple G. You know, they fought once. Can't you do it there?" Okay, I said, but listen, don't hold me to it. But when I have a new fighter who's, say, he has 50 bouts, I'll put every fight on a spreadsheet. And here's the tough part. I will go back and look at the record for each of the opponents and assign him a value. Then I'll total all the values and come up 50, or all the values divided by the number of bouts to come up with what I call a quality point average. The only thing that's used for is to look at it, is to apply it to his record. So let's say the guy has a quality point average of 3.2, and he's got a knockout percentage of 45%. Then I'll take that 3.2 times 45 to get a power number for him. Another guy may have fewer knockouts on his record, but his competition came out at like a 6.3. Well, when I take that times it, now he actually has more power, even though he doesn't have as many knockouts because of the quality of the opposition he faced. And that's the big time consumer that most people wouldn't want to bother with, is going back and doing, okay, well, how good was his competition? Then the last thing I factor in is age. And it's just another thing that's just so easy to overlook. When we first started, we would have people ask us, well, he beat him. Yeah, I know Berbick beat Ali, but Berbick was 27 and Ali was 48. Do you think a 27-year-old Ali or Berbick could have beaten it? Well, no, but I said, well, then, I can't make this guy in his prime based on a single fight when he was way past his prime. This guy was in his prime. So we've got to do the age thing too. And by the time you put that all in and keep it relative, you can't just do a fighter if you don't have a whole division of them. If you've got a division done, sure, you can plug one in and say, oh, look, he's up there in the top 15. He shouldn't be. Where did I make a mistake? But if it's just a single fighter and nobody to compare him to, you don't know whether it's right or wrong. So you have, I do a division at a time. And once I have all the divisions done, then it's easier to do. I could go back now and do any heavyweight. I've got about 200 rated. So I would know if I rated the heavyweight, yeah, that's about where he should be. He shouldn't be beating Zora Foley or Eddie Mason. He should be beating Cooney or somebody like that, and slot him correctly. So, but again, it's an inexact science. So hopefully we get it right more than we get it wrong.
Sounds pretty exact to me. I can't imagine that any folks have any then, it's Apple Football, just that's our name. A lot of folks modify it. I can't imagine anyone's going in and modifying your work after the fact to say, I got to tweak this number, that number, add a feature, do whatever. I can't imagine that's happening a lot.
That's really astute on your part. I don't normally run into anybody that's doing maybe a little tweak, but nobody really looking at the cards hardcore. What I do have people tweaking, and in most cases, rightfully so, they'll tweak a column on a chart. It's like, you know what? You're on your 4-rated fighters. I think they have too many punches that end up being killer instinct, and it's too much. So I cut it in. I took 2 off every one, and it seems to work better. Okay, fine. Give me as much data as you can. I'm happy to go with it. I don't think the game is perfect. I don't think it ever will be. But when I finally hang it up, I want to be able to say, we did the best we could with it, and made it as close as possible. But I know that there are things that could be improved. And if I were starting from scratch, truthfully, nobody else is going to hear this, right? I would probably do a whole lot different if I were starting over again.
Like what? Where would you start?
Seriously, I should have sent you this. Before I started Title Bout II, I came up with a new system that each fighter's card was on an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, front and back. But what I did was I was able to personalize everything. Marciano throws his Marianne right hand. I could put a name in, and I could really fine tune instead of trying to make it, okay, now I've got 100 fighters. If I rate them all, the ones that are rated a 3 cut, how often will they get cut? Well, I could narrow it down to a single, like, hey, I got Jerry Corey here. His cuts on that 8.5 by 11 are going to look a whole lot different than Ali's cuts on his 8.5 by 11. And I was really excited about it. And then I got in with a publisher, an old friend of mine who started his own game company. And he and I put out a couple, he called me, he said, look, you got anything hanging around? He said, I got this, I need some designs. And I lied and said, oh yeah, I got tons of them, And we opted, and we came out with a really, really, really hot, a good selling gladiator game called Gladiator Quest for the Runas. Now, it sold 2,000 games on release, which for a board game is a huge, especially again, gladiators aren't, that's not Risk, that's not Monopoly, So with that kind of game, it was a good number. So we were in between projects, and he said, I need a filler. How about your old boxing game? I said, yeah. He said, you go ahead, redesign it, and I'll get my artists and everything together, and we'll do this. We were halfway through it. I had my design done. He was getting his people in place. And tragically, he went to a fencing practice and keeled over with a massive heart attack. The company, that was it. They were done. He was the sole owner of the company. He had just gotten remarried. They had 3 kids, twins, little babies. He had just gotten a new, and he had just bought he thought, hey, there was a chance to get a local game store. He bought into that thinking, look, hand in glove, buddy. This is great. I make the games. I put them in my store. And tragically, he had no history of any physical problems. He actually had met his wife at fencing practice. He was an avid fencer, not an Olympic fencer, but he liked it as a sport. And that's a stressful sport. He told his wife that morning, he said, I'm just going for a little workout. I would be gone. Spent a half an hour on the mats, came off, picked up a towel, wiped his face off. And, Sunday morning, that was a Saturday. Sunday morning, I opened up the paper and I see, or the internet, I clicked on the internet and I'm looking at some gaming sites that said, renowned game designer, producer. And I thought, I know this guy. And then because I just looked at the face and I thought, and then I saw it because he and his brother had done White Wolf. They had done Werewolf the Apocalypse, Vampire the Masquerade, and so forth. And I had written for his magazine. He had a house organ called White Wolf Magazine. And I did columns for him on fantasy games and so forth. So we had a relationship for quite some time, which is why he had contacted me to begin with. But back to boxing, when he unfortunately passed, suddenly there was nobody to produce the game. Didn't matter that I had the design done. So it came down to one of two things. Either I tried to do it on my own or I scrapped it. But I was so far along, I thought, I got to give this a shot. So I contacted a source in Hong Kong that he had used for our Gladiator game. And the guy broke a ton of rules by allowing me only to order several hundred games. I couldn't do, their minimum at the time was 1,000. They said, can you do 500? I said, I don't know, man. 500. He says, I'll tell you what. So he talked to his boss. He said, because of what you've done before, and we hope to keep your business, we'll let you do. He said, it's going to be more per product. I said, yeah, I know, but I can't have 200 games sitting in my garage like I have of the Gladiator game. But, so we went that way. And fortunately, because of Kickstarter, I didn't make a killing because of my own fault. I didn't charge enough for shipping. I misunderstood. I had never done this. I had never been on the marketing end. I just did designs, and I blew it big time on, especially like foreign shipping. I get an order from England, and I was charging $39 for the game, and the shipping was $27, and it cost me $12 to make it. And was like, okay, I lost $12 on that one. Yeah. So I thought, well, I sold them all, $250. So I thought, well, I'm going to do it again. Only this time I'll be smarter. Unfortunately, things went sour politically, and the company started losing money, and said, hey, thank your politicians. She said, we now can only take an order of 1,000. And we had to get them shipped from Hong Kong to the United States. The first time was almost $2,000 for just 250 games. To do 1,000 was $6,000 some dollars just shipping. And I said, I can't. Thank you, and you've done great work, and people think your quality is tremendous, but that's out of my league. So I looked for ways to jury rig it, and okay, I can cut a corner here, I can do that, I can make my own boxes. That turned out to be quite efficient until I realized I'm 70, my wife's 67, we're dying here, trying to fill these orders, run 2 down to the post office, print the labels, get this out, ship it out. And well, how much am I making now on a game? $6? No, I got Social Security, man. I don't need this. So the only way I could keep it going was to keep the design and then let other people like Cards R Us do the fulfillment. They take 30%, but they print the cards and they ship out all orders. The only thing that I sell direct is downloads, PDF versions and that type of thing. So that's where it's at now, but I regret it. I regret not being able to have a nice box. It kills me to see my baby shipped out the way it is. And, the hardcore, it's like, hey, we don't care, just so we got new cards and new charts, we'll find a box to put it in, but, and we went, instead of when you produce a game, I mean, you may be aware of this, but the 2 largest expenses are the game box and the game board. Literally 50% of your money to develop the game goes into the box and the board. Now, this is before the advent that everything has to have miniatures. That's why games are $100 a piece now. Those miniatures are extremely expensive. But in the case of the boxing, it was the board and that. So I shifted everything on the game board to front and backs of 3 8.5 by 11 cardstock, and then there was no box. It came. And we made, if you wanted to order the entire game, there was a 1 button on Cards R Us that you could press and get everything as a bulk sale with 1 click, as opposed to. But, it was all I could do. So I have thought recently, just because of a contact from Amazon, that maybe I can make this work, that Amazon will handle all of the fulfillment if I can bring it in at the right price. The problem with Amazon is that you're billed for their storage space. If they're going to ship the product, if I made 1,000 games, all 1,000 or whatever have to be there, and whatever spaces it takes up in their warehouse, you pay on. And if it just sits there and 3 games sell, and now you got 1,997, you're billed for that. So I'd have to make sure that, yeah, I think that we can do this many. And so we'll see. We'll see.
You touched on a lot of really important issues, from succession plans, legacy games, if you will. There's a lot of expense. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of iteration and a lot of navigating tricky waters for distribution, creation. Just as you talked about the expenses there. I mean, APBA, people talk about the cost there sometime. There's a lot of things that these games, I mean, APBA's 70 years old, Strato's 60. They keep going, and there are a lot of one-person shops. They're the iconic leader. We go back to Dick Seitz and APBA.
Kickstarter, that was for the small guy. Kickstarter at the beginning was like, oh, this is a golden chick. Now, once the big boys realized, hey, we can get our product paid for up front. Now every major game company releases on Kickstarter. The important war game companies, science fiction, fantasy games, instead of just putting it out themselves. Now there's no room for the little guy. They get professional film, they get photographers, filmmakers who make these beautiful, looks like something that's going on the movie screen. You got this, hey, here's me with my cards. I'm flipping this one, somehow it just doesn't seem as good, So like you said, the even the marketing end has shifted in no time. And and when you're young, you keep up with that stuff. Now, I'd rather see my grandkids, but, I can't get away from it, unfortunately. We just released the super middleweights, and the super welterweights will be coming up next. And I always find that it's like, I don't want to do this. And then it's like, yeah, but you know what? We don't have KSOI Galaxy. He was a killer. We got to have a card for KSOI Galaxy. Then we didn't have Nigel Benn or Eubanks, Chris Eubanks. It's like, how can you have a boxing game without those guys, man? Come on. So I do, but I'm doing it more at my own pace now.
Well, that's good. We appreciate it for sure. I'm sure, everyone who's a fan of this game, it's gone again through a lot of iterations. Can you fight fighters class to class? Is that just a silly thing, or is there some mechanism in there? Or would it be completely obvious that, a welterweight versus, a heavyweight it's not going to work? It's just a silly exercise.
No, you can do it, because I use the same ratings procedure for every fighter. So it's, if I have Mickey Walker, he's in his prime at middleweight. And if I have Sonny Liston, he's in his prime at heavyweight. As long as I don't care about the weight, and I just want to see what would happen if these two guys fought on equal terms, being prime and prime, I can fight it. But if Mickey Walker wins, that doesn't mean he's going to beat Sonny Liston in real life. That just means, if everything were equal, he could. So yeah, you can. We tried coming up with a formula that would let you move fighters up, and if you went up, you did this to him, you modified that, and if you went down, and then we discovered again there was no consistency. The rule of thumb mentally, you thought, look, if you're moving up in class and you're just putting the weight on, you're going to lose some of your punch. You're just not going to. The guys at middleweight the guys that you took out at lightweight, you're not taking out at middleweight. So we got to reduce their. And then you get a guy like Pacquiao or someone like that who moves up, or or De La Hoya or some. They go up, and they just keep knocking guys out. It's like, oh wait, we can't do a blanket -2, and I'm sure as heck not going to do it. So we're at a point now where we just make a different card for every weight class. For example, trying to think of the guy that, Pacquiao will end up with 5 different cards, one for each of the weight class he's in, because again, I just can't make the adjustments across the board so that, we can move all these lightweights up to welterweights and they're going to perform. No, it just doesn't work that way. Even guys like Emil Griffith, who was a tremendous welterweight and a very good middleweight, but not he wasn't as good a middleweight as he was a welter. And people don't like to hear this, but Sugar Ray Robinson, I don't believe that there was a welterweight in the world ever who could beat him at his best at welterweight. But at middleweight, he was definitely beatable. I mean, he lost the crown 5 times, and he won it 5 times, but he did lose those fights. Is he still great? Sure, because he was fighting 27-year-old, 30-year-old men when he was in his 40s and winning. So, yes, he is, but he's not invincible as a middleweight. So you couldn't very well say, well, we're going to take his welterweight card, shift it up, change 1 or 2 number. We had to give him, his own card at welterweight and his own card at middleweight. And he'll lose to a Carlos Monzon, or he'll lose to a Marvin Hagler, and he won't lose to anybody as a welterweight. He's pretty unbeatable.
Speaking of unbeatable, we haven't mentioned one name, Tyson.
I'm sorry, Tyson. Ignoring him for a specific reason. This is only my take, and that's no more than any boxing fan. That I don't pretend to be the kind of historian that a Hank Kaplan or somebody was. I'm not. I know that. And it's just not a matter of being humble. I know I'm not that kind of I research for a purpose. I'm not some kind of glorified. I got every boxing I can snap off the date, the weight classes in an instant. And there are guys that can do that. My problem with Tyson is this. He was handled with kid gloves on his way up. When he made it, I don't want to disrespect any fighter. Of course. If you got in the ring and you never won, you fought 20 times, you deserve credit. There's nothing worse than crawling through the ropes, looking around and seeing, that's me, that's him, and he wants to kill me. And it's just me. Nobody's helping. You guys coming in? No. You're going to hit him with the water bucket or something? No, it's you. Go do it. Holy, it takes guts. It takes guts. But on a relative basis, the guys that Tyson beat to become an undefeated, or the heavyweight champion across the board, weren't great fighters. Tony Tubbs, guys like that. They just weren't great. They were good fighters, and this was at a bad period when drugs became a big factor in boxing. So he gets to this point, and then he decides, I'm what everybody said I am. And I don't have to do this. I don't have to. And suddenly, and Jose Torres made a comment in a book he wrote about him. He predicted, he said, the guy who beat Tyson is a guy who isn't intimidated and who has enough punch to keep him off him, and yet enough boxing skills to keep him at a distance, especially with a good jab. And he basically defined Douglas. Here comes Tyson. He's over in Japan. He doesn't train. Douglas is a nobody. This is going to be a walkthrough. The people in Japan love Tyson. And then he goes in, and this guy, he has doesn't know this guy's fighting for his dead mother. He's dedicating the fight to his mom who just passed away. And Douglas was a guy who, that's the point. Is he going to come in good condition? Well, he came in at one of his lowest weights ever, and he put on, a masterful performance. And you could see Tyson's just, wait a minute, and when he knocked Douglas down, and Douglas just smacked his fist like, I got careless on the canvas and got right back up. It was like, oh, not that Tyson at his best wasn't a quality top 15 all-time heavyweight, maybe top 10, probably top 12. He had brilliant hand speed for a heavyweight. And I'm talking even including Ali. Plus, the Tyson that was trained, by Castellammado and those guys, he knew how to box and weave. He knew how to get inside. He could get inside without getting hit and just rip a guy apart. By the time that he was done with this trainer, done with Teddy Atlas, D'Amato's gone. He suddenly, against like Razor Ruddock, there was no head movement. There was no bobbing and weaving, no move. He just walked straight ahead, and he depended on his power. And he did have such great power that he could get away with that most of the time. And then you run into a guy like Holyfield who says, hey, I don't care if I'm a midget. I'm going to fight you, and I don't care who you are. I'm coming for you, buddy. And if you're going to beat me, but I'm not giving it to you. And then all at once, it's like, okay, how do I beat this kind of guy with the mentality I have now versus when I had, it wasn't just a rumor that Tyson used to cry before some fights. His self-confidence level when he was first coming up, several times Teddy Atlas had to grab him and sit him down and say, quit crying. You got this. This guy's a nothing. You're this good. But what if I did? And it wasn't so much from what I've heard and what I've read that Tyson had so many doubts about himself. He was scared to death to let down people who were counting on him. He had never been given attention and caring. And suddenly here are these people that you're the best, Mike. We're going to turn you into a champ. And he was scared to death he was going to lose. And he just couldn't handle that thought. And he'd try to walk away. Atlas would push him in. And then, gradually, obviously, his ego got to a point where he believed, okay, I can do this. And so Tyson, yeah. Two different fighters.
Excellent.
Kind of like Ali, Ali before the suspension and Ali after the suspension. I had to make two cards for him. He wasn't the same fighter after he came back that he was before. You never heard about Ali's chin when he was dancing and prancing because nobody hit him on the chin hard, If he got knocked down early, it was because he was careless and horsing around, like the Doug Jones thing or Henry Cooper, I got you, man. You can't touch me. You get boing. And all at once it's like, holy man. And then he'd get up and dominate. But when he came back from the layoff, he couldn't sustain 15 rounds of being on his toes. He just couldn't do it. We'd see spurts of the old Ali, but he had to start relying on other things like his chin. And I mean, that guy, he took some tremendous punches, which unfortunately, ended up with having an effect on him, obviously with the Alzheimer's and the Parkinson's and the bit. But Tyson kind of in the same way. A young prime Tyson was a force. Older Tyson, not so much. When Donovan Ruddick could give him the kind of fights he did, that wasn't the same Tyson as, could have, that he was in his first, before the prison sentence.
Another man known for his big hits, Marciano.
Okay.
Marciano.
It's going to break my heart, but
an aging Joe Louis. He beats an aging Joe Louis. He's undefeated, but and then there's the computer model, and he beats Ali. What's your thought on all that?
No, there's no way in the world. Ali just had everything it took to beat Marciano. And like I said, he was a saint in my household. You didn't say anything bad about The Rock. And he, in some ways, he is, nowadays, Marciano is underrated because people don't realize the power that this guy had, how he would break blood vessels in guys' arms, how he would make a fighter grow old overnight, by beating them so badly. That was it. They never were the same. But against an Ali who had such a size advantage, who had such fast hands, who could take a punch if he got hit with it, I don't see 2 out of 10, maybe. And that's prejudiced. 1 out of 10 feels better. None out of 10 is possible. No. This is a guy now who at best would have been a light heavyweight, maybe a cruiserweight, but he would never be able to box heavyweight. And it's not just Marciano. I mean, people have just gotten bigger, stronger, except for people like me, but everybody else has gotten taller and stronger. I've stayed a midget all my life, but it just wouldn't have been. Can you imagine, this 5'11" Marciano going against Klitschko, 6'7"? I mean, it would have been David and Goliath. And the training techniques today versus too many things different. I just couldn't do it. That's my opinion.
There was a post on another boxing site. Very interesting boxer. He'd kind of sit there in the ring, arms completely down. I guess he didn't really have much of a training regimen per se. Bit of a smoker. Argentina's Nicolino El Intocable. I'm not sure how his last name is. Locche.
Nicolino Locche, excellent fighter. Excellent fighter. But here's the other thing that we run into with rating fighters. This is a guy who fought every one of his fights in Europe, at least to my memory. They didn't come these guys didn't come stateside. You know, it was like Marcel Cerdan. He was the toast of France, and he was famous all over Europe. But in Cerdan's case, he realized, hey, if I don't go to America and face the, Lamada, and that, I can't call myself this. And he did. But with some of these guys like Locche, and there are a few others too, that basically they never fought out of, if they fought out of their country, it was in another European country. They never came to the US, and it wasn't just the Italians or the Polish fight. A lot of the Hispanic fighters too, same deal. That's why they got that Tijuana taxi thing thrown at them. They'd be 27. They would fight 14 times in 2 weeks, and they'd have these 72-0 records and they never fought over 8 rounds, and then they'd finally come over and that's another thing, people don't, those few extra rounds make a huge difference. If you're a 4, 6, and 8 round fighter all your career, that's good for you, but it's not legit. When we went from the 15 round championship fights to the 12 round, those last 3 rounds made a huge difference. Now, I think that a lot of the good intelligent fighters said, okay, what I got to do is adjust my pace. Where before I might have taken this round off or gone, tried to do a little less that round because I had to save myself for 13, 14, or 15. Now I'm only going 12, so I can put out a little more, So those kind of things became factors too.
Let's go a little more in the fantasy realm again. Cut me, Mick. Balboa, Creed, Clubber Lang, Ivan Drago. You ever card them?
Yeah, we made them all. We made cards for all of them. We got badgered so much for well, what? I said, okay, here, this is it. I'm going to give it to you, And people they just had a great time with it. Unfortunately, Rocky on the cards couldn't do what Rocky in the movie did, but we fudged so many things. We he couldn't run out of, for example, Rocky couldn't run out of endurance. He never could run out of endurance. He always would catch a second wind, the cuts, unless you literally had your entire face skinned, you couldn't lose on a cut because, those guys were, let's face it, that's just going to happen. So we really tried to balance the cinematic with real-time boxing. And it was like, these guys come with a warning. Do not fight them against real fighters because there's not going to be any reality. These guys are, you don't want to fight that, like the Russian, you don't want to fight that guy against Marciano and Lewis, and he's just going to kill him. He's going to destroy him. But yeah, people got a kick out of it. Hey, they wanted Joe Palooka and guys like that from the comics. I was like, no, we're going to call it right here.
You talked a lot about your writing career. As you said, your brother is the math guy. You're the writer guy, the color guy, if you will. How does that kind of, in your time talking with other designers and maybe seeing how folks design things, even talking to your brother, the approach, how important is it to have kind of both ideas or both disciplines or angles, if you will, concentrated on a game of sports simulation?
Well, 2 tangents there. The first one being that it's extremely important if you can't do it all. These are supposed to be, especially in games that aren't boxing games. Everything in boxing is speculative. You couldn't prove it one way or another other than, hey, this is my opinion, and here's how we back it up. The guy did not hit 300 8 years in a row, so we could say, okay, the math formula is this many at bats, he gets this many hits. Now, what percentage of that? And we'll plot it on the card. Those games are truly statistical driven, the baseball, football, and that. This guy should average 4.5 yards. And of course, there's always that aberration. I love Sandy Koufax. He was like my brother, and I loved him. I liked him more than my brother. And I could never get that guy to win. Every time I'd pitch Koufax, he'd get bombed in 5 innings. And like, he's got this great card. He only struck out 3 guys. What the? And, but it was that aberration. And I have people with the boxing games like, it doesn't matter if I fight Dempsey against the lowest guy on here or that he gets beat. You have but taking aside the aberrations, then those kind of games that are built on statistics are statistical modules. They don't try to. I haven't seen any that necessarily, not the board games that necessarily have clutch ratings or mental discipline or training ethics. They have the numbers. If Roger Staubach came in pristine shape every game, well, his numbers were this. If Ty Cobb was a wild man, well, here's how many bases he stole. Did he spike a bunch of guys? Well, it doesn't matter. These are the bases he stole. The reason I think that the boxing game has been less likely to be criticized, not just ours, but any boxing game, is because there's no hardcore numbers that can back up, that you can say, hey, wait a minute. This guy, he fought him 22 times and he won 20 out of 20. No, he didn't. Nobody, they didn't do that. You don't have that glut of stats to really build up a big argument to attack a boxing game. Where if you've got a football game, and we're not even talking like an APBA or Strat, but some guy puts out a football game because he thinks, hey, I can do this. And every one of his quarterbacks end up throwing 20 or more interceptions. Somebody's going to say, wait a minute. There were never that many interceptions in the history of the game. No league ever had every quarterback throw 20 or more interceptions. And they've got a case because they've got an entire encyclopedia of stats that say, here's my proof. Your game stinks. Why? Because it doesn't even come close to what this is. And the Jets went 0-14 that year, and they went 9-7 in ours, or whatever. That's a big thing. That's a big thing. When you get to that point where boxing has so many intangibles, the other sports are pretty cut and dry, at least on the surface as a game simulation. Certainly we have the characters in every sport outside the game, but that doesn't impact. So, and then of course, so being statistically oriented, if you're not, you've got to come up with algorithms that make sense. When my brother dropped out of the boxing because he just had too many other things going and he just lost interest, I had to go and find mathematicians from college students who are majoring in math. They helped me work out. So when I was redoing the game and changing formulas, I had to run it by them and say, hey, look. And this was, and I didn't have a computer game. When I had the computer version, I could figure some things out myself just by fighting a fight 1,000 times in 10 minutes. And look at this. Here, and it summed up all my stats. There's no way I could fight 1,000 fights, flipping a card, keeping track of everything, and how many times did he get cut, how many times. So I needed somebody who really knew the math and because you get tricky. It's you're not just doing a straight percentage. Just like, okay, 4 out of 10, that's 40%. But what if it's 40% of 30%? Now what is it? And it's like, well, wait a minute. It's not what you think. It's not 30 times 40. You got 12%. No, it's a whole different logistics. And so I'd have to have math people come in. My assumption is that, the other games pretty much have their ducks in a row mathematically and are able to pump in the new stats and generate new cards.
we talk a lot about APBA ball and, the reality of a sport versus winning the game. Is there a way to game your game? Is there a way to take any boxer and win most of the time and be, if you're not, it's not really a face-to-face game. So it's solitaire.
That's why we've re-emphasized the strategies, selecting strategies, so that if you're playing face-to-face, you can say, oh, look, he should never have fought him that way. I'm going to keep him. Each round, I'm going to try to have him either stay on the outside or clinch, play it safe when he goes on the inside. So you select a strategy to make it more appealing other than just a card flip, let's see who wins type game. The other thing I did recently was we assigned traits to specific fighters. Good case would be Kenny Norton. Here's a guy who, I don't care what, probably legitimately beat Ali 2 out of 3. Definitely, Ali won 1 of the 3, even though he's given credit for 2. How could Kenny Norton beat Muhammad Ali 2 out of 3 and get knocked out in 1 round by George Foreman? Well, when you look at his record, almost every one of the times that Ken Norton got stopped, it was against a killer. I mean, it was against a guy who could really hit. People with average power, and I'm not talking so much about talent as the psyche. There was that factor in Norton that he had to be exceptionally. He didn't fight the way he fought. He didn't fight against the big hitters the way he fought against other fighters that didn't have that awesome reputation of being able to take you out with a punch like a Foreman. So we made an attribute that, look, if he's fighting any fighter who has a power of above 10, which was 10 was high, and if you went above it, then you add 2 to his knockdown and knockout numbers, simply to show that, look, he had a tendency to freeze up against these kind of fighters, and he just wasn't. And we extrapolated on that to other guys who you look at and again, I'm not trying to sell the game, but to explain, when I go over the records and I look at wins and losses, and I look at the number of rounds, sometimes, not always, there's a pattern where you can see, you know what, when I look at the scoring, he was fine until he fell behind on the scoring. And then he just lost it. He got beat every round. Whether it was I don't want to call him something bad like a front runner, but basically his confidence was there when he was winning. When he started to lose, he started to have some doubts. When he started to have some doubts, he became more susceptible when he wasn't the same fighter. So we built that in. This guy's a front runner. If he's not winning after 6 rounds, reduce this. All in attempts to do what you were saying and make it not only more realistic, but something that, okay, if I know he's that, would I use different strategies then? Would I know that he weakens at the end, his knockout rating goes up. I should just have him go all out for the first 4 rounds when he's at his best and see if maybe he can win that way. Do enough damage that he doesn't have to get to the end of the rounds. So things like that. Yeah.
The PC,
and that's the biggest weakness with the game. I would think with any boxing game that tries to be statistically realistic, it's very difficult to make it a head-to-head game. The more input that the gamer has, the less realistic the card that I made, because we're changing. What I say is, this is the optimum, this is it, but now we're going to fudge it. With baseball and football, hey, you got the defense and I'm the offense. We're cool. I'm the pitcher, I'm the batter. Cool. You're going to do a box 4 on the basketball court. I'm going to do this. I'm going to post high. I'm going to post low. They're made for head-to-head, which is what makes them so popular, I think.
Get Rock'em Sock'em Robots if you want to do some also.
Yeah.
So the PC game, how did you translate the board game to the PC? Are there dramatic differences, any different features besides the obvious it's on a computer?
The biggest difference was the computer random number generator inside is much more varied than flipping up the cards. You figure if you've got 100 cards, 50 and that's 2 rounds, the first 50 that go by in the round, those numbers are lost until you reshuffle. So while you may have, okay, I've made 20% of these cards a 1 knockdown. Well, 10 of them might have been, 15 of them might have been used in the first round and never came up. Now I only have 5 left in this round to come up. So there's a variance, but in the computer, the number 1 could come up 15 times in a row. So there was a tremendous adjustment the first time we went with the computer game because nothing was working. I mean, literally, we were not getting anywhere close to the results. And what it really came down to was that the random numbers. And from what I'm no computer expert, but it's not a true random number generator in most of these computers, unless they're high-end Pentagon computers. They're called pseudo random number generators. So you can get strings, and at times you might have 12, 10, 1, 3, 12, 10, and 2 rounds later have 12, 10, 1, 3, 12, 10, and 5 or 6 strings in a row. And if it just happens to hit at the right time on the card, suddenly you've got a repeat action, and if that led to a knockdown the first time, it's going to lead to a knockdown the second time. So that was the biggest thing that we had to work out, and it took a long time.
Last question. straightjabmedia.com is the website. What can I buy from you right now?
Any of the card sets, if you just want to print them out yourself or pick and choose. You can buy the PDF. You can buy the computer. If you have the computer game, you can buy, because they're all download files that instantly, if you buy it, 3 seconds later, you've got it and you can install it. What you can't buy is the game per se. Those you have to go to. And if you want printed cards, then everything there is done from drive-through cards. You can also buy my book on my site. So when I was doing all the numbers, I thought, you know what, I might as well use them. And I did a book called Boxing by the Numbers, the heavyweights. And I used my formulas and I broke down every fighter into all these categories, about, 100 or so of them, and did their rankings and came up with who's the number one through 100, heavyweights. So that's still there. Do you have time for one good story before you leave?
Absolutely.
This is, in 42 years, this is the strangest thing I ever had happen to me. I didn't know whether it was going to cost me a marriage or I was going to get shot. I get a phone call about 8:30 one night, and I hear this voice on the other end. It sounds like somebody from The Godfather. Hey, is this Jim Trunzo? Yeah. You the guy that makes that boxing game that, yeah. Well, wait, my wife wants to talk to you. My wife has to thank you. I said, hey, sir, I don't know who this is, but I don't know you and I don't know your wife. Yeah, she wants to thank you. Just hang on. I'm thinking, holy hell. My wife's going, what's going on? Some guy's wife wants to thank me for something. She says, what are you? So the wife gets on the phone and she says, hello, this is Gloria. And thank you for the beautiful jewelry I got. Here's my husband. I'm thinking, oh shit. I said, hey guy, before you say another word, I don't know your wife. I didn't buy her any damn jewelry. I don't know what you're talking about, but I think there's a mix up here. He says, settle down. Says, yeah, he says, there was a fight in Vegas this past week. He said, then the odds were like 7-1. He said, so I kept playing it on your computer game, these two guys. And I'm trying to remember, they were welterweights. And he says, your computer game kept saying the underdog was winning. He says, I told my wife, what the hell, I'm going to put a couple thousand on this underdog at 6-1. She told me I said, hey, if I win this, I'll buy, you go out and you pick out a couple $1,000 worth of jewelry. And he says, he won. He said, I told her we'd find you and you'd thank him. And that's why we're here. So you have a good night. I'm thinking, how cool is this, right? Until that night, my wife and I are laying in bed and she says, I just thought of something. I said, what if it had lost? Would he been on the porch saying, hey, we got to talk here, Paisan? And that's the icing on the cake there, buddy.
Thankfully, that all worked out just as it should have, sir. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thanks for everything. If you ever need anything, give me a call again. We'll do it again.